In April 2025, President Trump of the United States suddenly announced that he would impose high tariffs on countries around the world. As a result, stock prices have already fallen sharply, and there are concerns that the economy will soon fall into a major recession. Therefore, I would like to introduce the countermeasures that Mr. Shigehiro Nakamura has proposed for the manufacturing industry. First, I would like to explain the impact of Trump tariffs and risk countermeasures from the perspective of Japanese manufacturing. Anyone can see this warning when they open the ChatGPT. The impact of this tax is not only large internationally, but also has a huge impact on the United States. For this reason, well-known economic figures in the United States have issued warnings, but President Trump does not seem to be in a position to change the tariff measures even after seeing this kind of warning. Therefore, even if we are a company that is not involved in export tariffs, as a manufacturing company, we need to prepare countermeasures against this risk as soon as possible, from the perspective that a major recession is coming to the world. I would like to consider the risks of the Trump tariffs from the standpoint of Japanese manufacturing. As you all already know, Japan is a country with few natural resources. Japanese companies have been using resources imported from other countries to manufacture products. The impact of the current tariffs is not only the increase in sales prices and the decrease in sales due to trade tariffs on exports, but also the current situation of increasing prices of oil and food, which will further magnify the problem. As a company, this will have a major impact not only on manufacturing and sales, but also on the hardships facing employees. From a macro perspective, given the current situation, it is unclear what specific serious problems the Trump tariffs will bring to each company. However, what manufacturing companies need to clarify and address is the risks shown in the PXS below the borderline in this figure, and to start taking measures now to minimize the damage. There is a saying that goes, there is no need to be afraid when it comes to risk management, and I hope that everyone will identify the risks and seriousness that will affect their companies as soon as possible and take measures. Currently, many media outlets are reporting on the issues and countermeasures regarding the Trump tariffs from various angles. However, as you all already know, the political and national economic measures to eliminate the Trump tariffs are different from risk countermeasures taken from the perspective of a single company. Therefore, it is necessary to take the risk information and countermeasures that you have collected and considered using the structure shown in this figure, narrow it down to information about your company and your employees, and turn them into concrete measures. Furthermore, from the structure of this figure created by NASA during the Apollo program, I recommend that you select the PPA method to begin risk countermeasures. By writing the PPA analysis in this list, we can proceed with the review. By working through this table from left to right, you can proceed with risk countermeasures together with everyone in your company. First, list the items from the most serious risks in the leftmost column and write the reasons. Next, perform a risk assessment for each item listed. Risks are evaluated on a 5-point scale using P and S shown in the upper left. After that, preventative measures are invented. This content is a concept that describes, for example, fire prevention measures. Preventative measures are evaluated for their effectiveness and feasibility. As a result, whether the previously evaluated risk can be reduced or not is evaluated after a 5-point scale evaluation of E's and F, feasibility. Furthermore, when problems occur no matter how much prevention is done, emergency measures should be prepared and measures should be taken. After evaluating this evaluation and the contents of the review with E and F, the degree of risk reduction is evaluated. This type of analysis is a risk assessment, and the success or failure of this is determined by the countermeasure information and your wisdom. Once the risk analysis, preventive measures, and emergency measures shown above are prepared, The situation should be similar to the BCP measures that many manufacturers have achieved in natural disaster countermeasures. The effect is that, first, the preventive measures should reduce the various damages and their severity that will be affected by the Trump tariffs, as shown in Circle 1 in the figure. Secondly, the emergency measures should contribute to the measures to recover in a short time after a disaster, as shown in Circles 2 to 4. I don't need to warn you, but the success of your risk management depends on the quality of your company's preventive measures and emergency measures. So, although it may be a bit commercial, I would like to introduce many Kindle books by Mr. Nakamura on risk management and countermeasures for various factory problems, so that they may be of some help to you. Although the target was different, a problem similar to the impact of the Trump tariffs hit the world in 2019, the COVID-19 pandemic. I believe that some of the measures taken may be useful in dealing with the current risk, so I would like to introduce one example. The reason Mr. Nakamura selected to bring up COVID-19 is because it is similar to the Trump tariffs in that it is a sudden global crisis with huge impacts, and even if a single company speaks out, there is no way to address it. The situation in which the new coronavirus is infecting people around the world is shown in this diagram. Conversely, this diagram also shows the measures that each person can take to prevent damage. The reason Mr. Nakamura selected to bring up COVID-19 is because it is similar to the Trump tariffs in that it is a sudden global crisis with huge impacts, and even if a single company speaks out, there is no way to address it. For manufacturing companies, securing profits is one of the important requirements for the sustainable activities of the company. Therefore, when looking at risk measures along with methods for securing profits based on the break-even point, there are three aspects. Tariffs are variable costs that are proportional to sales, and price increases for purchased materials are an increase in variable costs. And the management risk measures for increasing profits are actions to reduce such costs. In Japan, long ago, when people were in trouble and there was no way to deal with the problem, they would run to temples to ask for help. This method was to ensure that if a person in trouble ran to a temple, someone would help them. It was also to gain wisdom to regenerate. When the COVID-19 problem occurred, people in trouble would post their problems on a website and ask for solutions, and wise people would provide solutions. For example, when there was a shortage of masks, people who promote the Toyota method provided support, increasing productivity by several dozen times in a short period of time and helping with mask production. This is a typical example. Mr. Nakamura showed this figure to many companies so that the above method can be widely used in the industrial world. The vertical axis shows the problems that companies are struggling with due to COVID-19, and the horizontal axis shows the countermeasures. The analysis shows that if you put solutions to these problems and examples into this matrix, it will be possible to provide concrete measures that will be useful to many people. If companies that are struggling with countermeasures against Trump tariffs use this method, it should increase the chances of them helping them obtain countermeasures from the world's wisest people. This figure is an example showing the contents of the matrix analysis for the COVID-19 problem. In the case of COVID-19, there were reports of measures introduced by specialized institutions for bacterial countermeasures, measures taken by famous doctors and many other experts, and information on social media. As for the countermeasures against the Trump tariffs, I expect each company to write down the problem and measures, organize them in a matrix analysis, and find such effective measures from the organized effective measures. Securing customers and profits is extremely important for a company. Therefore, we will introduce some representative cases and initiatives that many people have learned from and used as reference in the past. Even when faced with problems like this, the manufacturing industry needs a strategy to continue operating sustainably. Summarizing the results of Mr. Nakamura's research into corporate strategies, it is clear that to a certain extent, each company has a range of strategies to choose from. There is a saying that, if you get one strategy wrong, even if you implement 1,000 countermeasures, you won't get results. In this sense, it is important for each company to first be certain of the environment they find themselves in and the strategy they should adopt before starting to deal with Trump tariffs. When President Kennedy took office, the United States was in the midst of a major recession. As a countermeasure, the president apparently investigated people who had made efforts to help revive the United States, regardless of the era or country. As a result, he spoke of modeling his activities on those of Yosan Yasuji, who, around 1980, became head of the Yonezawa domain, which was suffering from a deficit at the time, at the age of 17, and successfully turned it into a profitable domain. However, the newspaper reporters who heard this explanation at the time did not know about Yasuji's activities, so they returned to Japan and investigated further. This figure shows the state of the Yonezawa domain before Yasuji Yosan's reforms. Although he was young, Mr. Yasuji used practical methods for improving the country that he learned from Mr. Heishu Hirai. Mr. Yasuji, who was only 17 years old, was hired by the domain and took up the post of president. This domain was once a prosperous large country, but it is clear that it was facing many problems. Key points of the reforms carried out by Mr. Yasuji Yosan can be summarized as shown in the figure below. What is noteworthy here is that in order to clarify the strategy, he organized his subordinates who were enthusiastic about the reforms into project teams and created proposals that would enable the domain to turn a profit. He created key people for each reform and tried to develop them like a spark igniting a bonfire. He achieved and spread the results of the reforms regardless of the existing system or status. Currently, part of Mr. Yosan Yasuji's reforms were target cost reforms, as shown in this figure. This is a method of looking at products and work from the perspective of the ideal minus the current situation, and thoroughly reducing the cost of that gap. In the early 2000s, the labor cost of Chinese workers was 1/30 that of Japan. For this reason, many companies, including assembly companies, that could not cover this labor cost difference moved production to China and other Asian countries. There was concern that if this situation continued, manufacturing would disappear from Japan. At that time, Suzuki, the president of Suzuki, which produces everyday small cars and motorcycles, organized a project to commercialize motorcycles that could be manufactured with 1/30 of the labor cost. This figure is an example of this, and it was brilliantly realized. It also became a hit product at the time. I thought that this initiative would be an example of an effective measure to counter Trump's tariffs, so I introduced it here. As you know, Japanese industry is supported by more than 90% of small and medium-sized enterprises. Many of these small and medium-sized enterprises supply parts and other products to major manufacturers, but as mentioned earlier, many of these companies have moved production to countries with lower labor costs, and as shown on the left side of this figure, cost reduction measures have reached their limits. In the end, they have shifted to strategies like those on the right side. In the early 2000s, as mentioned earlier and shown on the left side of this figure, large Japanese manufacturers moved their production overseas, and many small and medium-sized enterprises lost their customers for the parts and other products they had previously delivered. As a result, these small and medium-sized enterprises joined forces and, fortunately, with the spread of the internet environment, moved to directly selling high-value-added products to the international market, making use of their advanced manufacturing technology. The results of this activity were great, And it was a major factor in Japan's ability to withstand the effects of the expansion of overseas operations and avoid a recession as a whole. So, I would like to introduce the efforts of Nosaku Company, a tin casting manufacturer that has successfully implemented overseas direct sales measures for small and medium-sized enterprises. As shown in this figure, this company was on the verge of bankruptcy. However, it chose the tableware market as an industry where it could fully utilize the characteristics of tin. Although it faced great difficulties at first, this is a successful example of a company that successfully launched a new product into a new market. This is a case where the son of a man who worked for Toyota returned to a foundry manufacturing company that was on the verge of bankruptcy and tried to turn it around. The company had previously supplied parts to automobile manufacturers, but the company lost its customers when their suppliers went overseas. So, although it was a different field, the son made use of the characteristics of casting and high processing precision to manufacture and directly sell sealed pot production for cooking, and this is a case where the company was incredibly successful. The examples in this figure can be helpful for technological development. In this example, the paint developed was useful in solving a problem that was thought to be impossible in a different field. Company A, a manufacturer of rolled materials, once had to manually search for scratches detected by sensors, because it was a big deal when scratches occurred. This was a huge amount of work and a tough job. Company A then put out a wanted request to many paint manufacturers. One company then requested to test the use of this paint. Company A then applied a special paint to the area detected by the sensor. This paint could not be removed at all even during this type of process. This made manual inspection unnecessary. So far, I have introduced some success stories of companies that have concluded that there will be no sustainable development if we continue to extend the measures we have taken so far, and have taken measures to overcome threats by organizing their technologies and market responses and using a SWOT perspective to enhance their strengths, eliminate their weaknesses, find opportunities, and overcome threats. This table shows the strategies that these companies have chosen. Please use it to prepare for the recession caused by the Trump tariffs. No matter how excellent a company's technology is, or how well it makes products that customers will surely appreciate, if these products are not known, received, used, and highly evaluated by customers, sales will not increase. So, I'm going to introduce this solution. There are many factors that make a product popular with customers and sell well, but in order to create a product that sells well and satisfies customers even at a slightly higher price, the manufacturing industry needs to address the requirements A to G shown below this figure, in addition to the characteristics shown in this figure. In the 21st century, companies that compete with their rivals to provide products to the market or sell materials and parts to customers are expected to be hit hard by the recession caused by the Trump tariffs. In that sense, in addition to the checks shown in this figure, it is necessary to clarify the strengths and characteristics that have made your sales successful so far and make various preparations and measures. When Japan was in a recession in 1990, Professor Karatsu gave a lecture at JMA on the importance of understanding customer needs. Here is the gist of it. When Mr. Karatsu was a student, he was consulted by the owner of a nearby tofu store. The idea was that the tofu store was in decline and he wanted to get rid of it. So, he used the famous novel Moby Dick as a theme and had the tofu store sell random tofu for 3 months. As a result, the reasons why customers purchased became clear, and by selling to markets and customers where it was popular, sales tripled and the tofu store began to thrive. The following year, JMA held a case study presentation session for companies that had heard this lecture, but all the presentations had similar results. This, a voice of customers, is one of the fundamentals of market research. Every company has placed importance on finding out customer needs and turning them into products. This figure is an example that explains this using the Johari window analysis. There are customer needs that the manufacturer knows about and those that are not yet latent. In marketing, it has been shown that when the manufacturer develops and provides a product that satisfies latent customer needs, sales numbers increase dramatically. Daikin Industries used to manufacture mainly industrial air conditioners. Here, they promoted a method of listening to and exploring customer needs, including through call centers. However, when Japan was in a recession, Daikin Industries president, Takayuki Inoue, ordered product developers at the time to visit customers directly to hear their true needs for industrial air conditioners. As a result, when new product development personnel actually visited customers, they found that there was a high demand for reducing running costs. So, as shown in this figure, they worked on reducing the power consumption of motors, which had been improved to the max. As a result of these measures, they achieved a 60% reduction, far exceeding the target of a 40% reduction in power consumption. As a result, sales recovered in a V-shape in the midst of the recession, and now they have created an opportunity to enter the home air conditioner market. As of 2025, 50% of people in Japan suffer from hay fever, and those who suffer from this condition are struggling to find a solution. A recent survey showed that there are almost no patients in an area that produces a type of mandarin orange called Ijayabara. Although the number of people in this area is small, food manufacturing using this mandarin orange is currently growing rapidly. Furthermore, since the biggest cause of hay fever is cedar pollen, the cultivation of cedar trees that do not produce pollen, as shown in figure, is progressing at a rapid pace. If we use this example as a reference, if there is a product manufacturing and sales method that does not involve the Trump tariffs, it should be an effective business to address this problem. Recently, many people have been using ChatGPT to conduct various research. So, I also searched for products that will grow globally in the future. If there are any products among them that are not related to Trump tariffs, those who are involved in that market may have a business opportunity. The Trump tariffs are tariffs on products imported into the United States. From the standpoint of a manufacturing company, a political approach would be extremely difficult. Therefore, instead of dealing with exports, I would like to introduce a business development related to local production and consumption measures, which are a completely separate measure advocated by Mr. Nakamura and are closely related to recent global environmental measures. As can be seen from this figure, local production for local consumption measures are unrelated to export and import measures, and are one of the targets of the global warming problem. They are measures that contribute to solving energy problems related to logistics. For example, one solution to the world's food problems could be plant factories that use renewable energy. This time, we will take up the issue of electricity, which is directly and indirectly deeply related to the issue of global warming, in relation to the issue of local production and consumption. In Japan, there was a time when thermal power generation accounted for nearly 70% of electricity generation. Naturally, a country with no natural resources has relied entirely on imports. In Japan, electricity is provided mainly by major power companies and is generated using alternating current. With alternating current, surplus electricity disappears into the air. The current situation is that the large electricity used by factories and the small 100-volt electricity used in homes are integrated. However, as this figure shows, just as the information society based on the web is already decentralized, electricity is also moving in that direction. Since the Great East Japan earthquake in 2011, Japan has frequently experienced power shortages. A typical example of this situation is when it is cold and snowy and electricity demand increases. Although the solar power generation provided by Tokyo Electric Power Company is on the rise at 24%, there is still a supply shortage. To address this issue, Tokyo has made it mandatory to install solar panels on newly built houses from April 2025 as a measure to decentralize electricity, but factories also need to take the measures shown in this figure. This type of measure is also an example of local production and consumption of electricity in response to global environmental issues. Renewable energy includes not only solar power, but also wind power, geothermal power, biopower, etc. Looking at the current situation of wind power generation, which Japan is vigorously promoting, when all plans are completed, it will be twice the size of the entire country of Japan. Moreover, it is cheaper than nuclear power. However, even though the amount of electricity used in Japan has decreased recently due to the decline in the population, the demand for electricity is on the rise due to the spread of AI. In addition, since all the equipment for wind power generation is imported, the construction of wind power plants is currently in jeopardy due to price increases. To address this issue, it is necessary to consider local production and consumption and produce the equipment domestically. In Japan, solar and wind power generation is progressing, but the disadvantage of this method of power generation is that it is dependent on nature. For this reason, the Japanese government has been promoting nuclear power without any measures to deal with the waste disposal problem. But if you consider that Japan is a volcanic country, anyone can see that future power generation should focus on geothermal power generation. Japan's nuclear power plants have been promoted largely due to political issues. However, as you can see in this figure, looking ahead to the future, we need to deal with the growing oil energy problem related to Trump tariffs, and consider the decentralization of power and the local production and consumption of energy measures that I will introduce. In this situation, Japan needs to move forward with the rapid spread of geothermal power generation. This figure shows the difference in power generation between Iceland, which has a similar geothermal environment to Japan, and Japan, which has adopted different energy policies. In Japan, the competition between hot springs and geothermal power generation, as well as the problem of destroying the scenery of national parks, have been used as reasons to prevent geothermal power generation, but Iceland has successfully solved these problems. In short, just like the in-house production of wind power generation equipment mentioned earlier, this kind of know-how is something we should learn from Iceland. Earlier, I said that Japan should learn about geothermal power generation from Iceland. However, this is limited to the issues of competing with hot springs and destroying the scenery of national parks. The reason is that, technically, as shown in this figure, Mr. Shoji Numata, who was the chairman of Business Supermarket and successfully developed it in Japan, has already invested his own money to successfully develop geothermal power generation. He is already being inundated with construction consultations from hot springs. We should pay attention to the fact that Japan is a pioneer in spreading geothermal power generation and realizing a stable, distributed power generation method that produces and consumes electricity locally. In order to help companies get out of the Trump tariff issue as soon as possible, I have taken up local production and consumption measures, which were not included in the ChatGPT, as one of the countermeasures, and have taken up the electricity problem, which is one of the representative examples of energy issues and countermeasures. The reason for this is that, although other targets of this type include natural disasters related to global warming, as this figure shows, it is clearly more important and urgent for the survival of humanity than general product manufacturing and sales measures. Thank you for watching and hearing of this video for such a long time. This time, I have summarized in 5 points the contents of measures that Mr. Shigehiro Nakamura has put together for the manufacturing industry to take early on in the event of a global depression that many famous people have warned will come in the future, starting with the Trump tariffs, and I hope that they will be of some use. Measures will vary from company to company, but as I mentioned earlier, I hope that this content will be of some use to you, in line with the teachings of our predecessors that the more prepared you are, the less damage there will be.